All right. Welcome, 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 welcome. Admit all, everybody in. All right. Welcome back, everybody. Yeah, so if probably y'all have mostly done a Kahoot before, but I will talk you through it. Share screen. Got my furry co-pilot here with me. Not that one. Okay. And we're going to continue with basic because we're cheap. I set this up earlier. Okay, here we go. Nope, not that. We're going to do classic mode. All right, so basically what's going to happen here is you're going to go to kahoot.it. You're going to put in this game pin. So I'll give you guys a couple minutes to do that. Game code is 2769756. I just put the game code in the chat. Welcome. All right. All right, let's go ahead and get started. And if you haven't jumped in yet, you can, I think you can get in anytime. So don't panic. All right, what is classical conditioning part of? Talked about this last week.
Hey, we can't see your screen, so the question isn't popping up.
No. Not even in y'all's window?
We can see
No,
like
we
the
can't
question,
see a
but we
question.
can't see the answers.
Oh, okay. Hold on. Is that better? Or that help at all?
Yeah,
Yeah, what can you see?
we can see it now. This should be good.
Okay, cool. All right. So to answer the question, classical conditioning is part of the behavioral model. So talks about classical and operant conditioning, how those are both parts of behaviorism. So psychoanalysis, we're talking about Freud. Humanism, we're talking about Maslow, all those guys. So let me move you guys over here. Next. All right, who developed the psychoanalytic theory?
We still can't see it.
Yeah, it's frozen on the last question.
Oh, okay. Well, this is just going great. Yeah, I don't know how to fix that. Let me stop and restart it. You all can see me, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Still frozen on the last one, or is this better?
This is good. This is good.
All right, fingers crossed. Okay, so we're talking about evolution. We're talking about the change of species over time. So we talked about how evolutionary psychology means that we would like encourage certain behaviors genetically over a period of time to adjust to our environment. Like I think I mentioned last time, like Dutch people and Belgian people being able to speak a whole bunch of languages because they were port countries and they had a bunch of different languages around them. And so we didn't talk about this a ton, but we can talk about it now. Okay, so when we talk about internal validity, we were talking about how well your your independent variable affects your dependent variable. So the one about extent to which the results can be generalized to the wider population is a very good guess. That is actually a concept called external validity. So that is the ability to be able to like take what you've learned and apply it somewhere else. So we are specifically talking about the internal quality of an experiment. Consistency is part of that, but it's not the entire idea. So that's an important thing we're going to talk about like when we do research stuff. The independent variable in this particular chart, I should say, because we talk about which variable goes on which axis. Independent variable in this case is time, because time is on the x-axis. The dependent variable would be position. You can also see that there's not a super strong correlation between time and position in these two variables. Dependent variable. Very good. So the dependent variable in this case, one on the y-axis, is tadpoles. I don't know what was going on in 1992, but it was a very good year for these frogs. You can see how that gets represented graphically. Placebo. Not a question. Definition. So I don't know why this is the graphic they went with, because I don't see how these two dudes have anything to do with the placebo. They spelled mathematics wrong, and this isn't really a math question. So the placebo is the fake drug, largely dependent on the expectations of the patient. There's this thing called the placebo effect, where because you believe you're getting the intervention, your brain actually heals itself, or heals whatever the drug is supposed to do. So how does a double-blind experiment work? Very good. So subjects and the researcher don't know the treatment. So if it was just the subjects don't know the treatment, it would be single blind. It does not cause blindness. Sometimes I pick these questions because the answers make me giggle a little bit, and that is one of them. What is the control group? Just in general, in a specific experiment. Control. You must learn control. So the control group is the one that does not change. They might change. That's not always true, but they're not going to change because of the intervention, because they didn't get it. The experimental group would get the intervention. Oh, well, that kind of just answered this, but. Find out how many AO are paying attention. That is true. As the experimental group does receive the independent variable, the control group does not. Even if they think they are, they don't. What is the reason that we randomly assign groups? We're ensuring the groups are as equal as possible. Okay, so equal in this case meaning have an equal chance of getting a treatment, because they might not be equal. That's the idea behind like a representative assignment versus random assignment. But we are trying to eliminate researcher bias in terms of our participant selection. Suitable sample is an interesting word choice, because we might choose a sample that doesn't represent our entire population, but it will be objective nonetheless. All right, what correlation is this? And I have a bunch of different questions like this, because there will be multiple correlation questions on your test. This is an important concept to understand, both in the sense that you need to understand like what represents what kind of correlation, and like what a correlation actually means. So this is a positive, a relatively strong positive correlation. Okay, so you could conceivably draw a line right through those points that represent your correlation coefficient, and that line would have a positive slope, and therefore the correlation is positive. Correlation is this. No correlation at all, because if you're going to try and draw a line through this, good luck. They're just a bunch of randomly collected points that don't appear to have any connection to each other whatsoever. So we'd say those have no correlation. It's time for the researcher to go back to the drawing board. Is a strong positive correlation. We might even say that that's a perfect correlation, because for every number on the x, there appears to be an equal number on the y. What is this correlation? Yes, we would call that a strong negative correlation, because pretty much exactly what I said a second ago about positive correlation is true. It's just going in the other direction. So this is a negative slope, and for every x-axis, a number on the x-axis is going to have a flipped number on the y-axis. What is the correlation coefficient of this? Before y'all freak out, there is a way to figure this out. Very good. Okay, so quick test taking advice. So we can go ahead and eliminate a couple of answers here, even if we don't know exactly what it is. So we can tell from this that it is definitely positive. So with that in mind, we're going to go ahead and eliminate -1 and -0.5. So now the only answers left are positive 0.5 and positive 1. So it's not positive 1 because it would just be a straight line. But in this case, that would just leave positive 0.5, which is about what we're looking at here. I think if we drew a line of best fit, that is pretty much exactly where it would land. So that's a good example of what a test question would look like. First step is to ask a question, usually from somebody else's answers. And so forming a hypothesis comes from the question, and then we will synthesize our question with research that already exists. Then we'll form a hypothesis, then test that hypothesis, analyze our results, report our results, and then somebody else will ask a question based on our results. It's the last step of the scientific method. This is also usually, if you've ever seen like a proper scientific paper, what comes at the end. And if you were only going to read one part of a scientific paper, which I may or may not have done many times, this is the part that you should read. We're talking about drawing a conclusion, because in that conclusion paragraph, they will have, whether or not their experiment worked, its effect, the dependent variable's relationship with the independent variable, and like sort of its broader societal implications. Survey favorite sports. Example of what? We would call that qualitative data. Okay, so qualitative data is usually not going to be numerical. It's going to be a little more subjective. And then quantitative is going to be the opposite. So a survey of favorite sports, that is very subjective information, and it is not numbers based. So we would say that is qualitative data. Can't really make a chart out of that. That makes sense. Simple random sample. What does that mean? So it allows an equal chance of being chosen. The idea here is to cut down on bias. It is not a biased sample. It does not show favoritism. That is really the reason why it exists. And it can not represent the group sample, but sometimes it does. So the best answer here is allowing an equal chance of being chosen, because that is exactly the reason that we do a simple random sample. Sometimes more than one answer is going to be like kind of correct, but then there's one accurate one. Find the humanist. Makes it sound like I set up some sort of puzzle. Okay, you have to solve a maze and there's a humanist in the middle of it. But no, thankfully it's not that complicated. Talking about Abraham Maslow. Okay, so John Watson and B.F. Skinner were both behaviorists, and then William James was the sort of guy associated with functionalism, creating that idea. Maslow and Carl Rogers were both pretty prominent humanists. Maslow, if you'll remember, came up with the hierarchy of needs. It's like this big chart of human needs, more basic stuff at the bottom of the chart, more like performance-based stuff at the top. I'm talking about Maslow. Right, so George Miller had a very famous theory about how much we can remember at one time. You guys remember? So he believed it was 7 plus or minus 2. Okay, so that isn't short-term memory. Short-term memory doesn't last very long. We'll talk about that when we actually get to our memory unit. But the idea there is that we can only remember between 5 and 9 things at once. Now we can extend that through a process called chunking, which is putting more of those chunks together. It's how we do things like remember phone numbers or passwords. What is chunking? Yeah, I need to randomize these questions next time. So we're organizing info into meaningful units to make it easy to remember. So if you think about a phone number, instead of just thinking about it as 10 numbers, it's really a section of 3, another section of 3, and a section of 4. And each one of those, we've sort of learned to categorize them into their own little section so that we can remember them. What is biopsychosocial psychology? So I will go ahead and say that this is a good test question example because all of these correspond to a perspective that we have talked about. All right, so biopsychosocial, we're talking about integrating biological, psychological, and sociocultural levels. It's right there in the name. So approach focused on the body, mostly brain and nervous system. That would probably be the biological perspective. An argument could also be made for a cognitive study of observable behavior responses in their environment. That's going to be behaviorism, emphasizing a person's positive qualities, growth, and freedom. That is going to be humanism. All right, almost done. We're getting there. The founder of psychology. It's an old white guy with a beard, which does eliminate Mary White Calkins. Wilhelm Wundt is what we're talking about here. I think nobody picked Mary White Calkins. Good for you guys. So Max Wertheimer, we don't really talk about him a whole lot, but he's also an important early psychological figure. William James was the functionalism guy. Wilhelm Wundt is this particular old white guy with a beard. So he was the objective introspection guy. He was one of the first people that sort of experimented with instruments, trying to figure out which parts of the brain, which parts of the mind were responsible for what. Which one is not a psychological perspective? Recreational psychology is not a psychological perspective. Evolutionary, biological, and humanistic all are. Yeah, do psychology recreationally. What is psychology? Big question, short answer. All right, so this is the scientific study of the mind and behavior. So a scientific study about neurological behaviors would be more like neuroscience, which fits under the psychology umbrella, and they're obviously pretty related. Ethical experiment, I mean, they can be. Some of them can be quite unethical, but this is the scientific study of the mind and behavior. It's most accurately what we could describe psychology as. What are the goals of psychology? This is at the beginning of chapter 1. So we are describing, so asking a question, describing what we see, trying to explain that phenomenon by looking at research and sort of synthesizing that with our own observations, predicting, so creating a hypothesis based off of that information, and then based on the results of our own tests and data, coming up with a way to change or implement an intervention based on everything we have studied so far. All right, last one. What is operant conditioning? Association of reward and punishment. This gentleman is B.F. Skinner, who was a very important early operant conditioning advocate and guy who studied that a lot. So interesting, my mom is currently in her PhD work to get her doctorate in early childhood education, and she hates B.F. Skinner. The behaviorists have become more controversial as time has gone on, especially when it comes to early childhood learning. Okay, good job, everybody. So hopefully the next time we do that, which will probably be 2 weeks from now, we'll get some of the kinks out of that. But so for next time, I will go ahead and put out your assignment. Probably, I'm gonna hopefully do it today. But it is pretty short. It's like 250 words, not hard at all. I really enjoyed reading all of y'all's introduce yourself stuff. So basically what we're going to be doing for this weekend is asking a research question. So using a variety of the perspectives we've already discussed, we talked about the goals of psychology and the scientific method and all that kind of stuff. It starts with asking a question, and we ask a question based on our own observations and we're curious about, stuff that we read, things like that. So basically the idea is you're going to be asking a research question about academics. So you guys are in an interesting position to ask this because you have had multiple school years affected by a pandemic. But yeah, a good psychological question would be like, how has that affected how you've learned? How does, how does having something like ADHD affect your ability to participate in remote learning, things like that. So we're not really getting too deep into like experimental type stuff. We're really just asking a very straightforward question. And then what I do want you guys to work on is critically evaluating and sort of integrating the information we have talked about from those psychological perspectives into those research questions. Like I said, it'll be somewhere between 250 and 300 words, about a page, not a big deal. And that will be due Sunday night at midnight. All right, so it's 9:57. We're in pretty good shape. If y'all have any questions, you can email them to me. I can go ahead and put my email in the chat. My email is in the chat. It's also on your syllabus, which is if you go to Blackboard, go to course tools, concourse syllabus, my contact information is there as well. But yeah, if y'all don't have any questions, I will grade your stuff this weekend and I will see you guys next Wednesday.
So you mentioned that the class ends normally at 10:15.
Yes.
Okay, so last semester, whatever class we had with remote tech ended at like 9:45,
Mhm.
and that was manageable because we have class at like 10:20.
Yeah.
I live 30 minutes from the school.
Mhm.
So I leave around like I'm late right now, so I leave around like 9:50.
Mhm.
So I was wondering if there's like any way that we could go
So what I would suggest in that situation is like just go ahead and leave, or like bring Zoom with you on your phone or something, because like I'm not going to be offended if you hop out because I can't see you guys anyway. But that would be my suggestion, because
Okay.
there will be good stuff in those last 10 minutes or so, because like most of the time, like today we're finishing up about 10. That would be most normal. I think I don't know that there'll be too many days that will actually go all the way to 10:15.
Okay, so I can just use it on my phone.
Mm-hmm.
Car. Okay. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. All right, team.